Welcome to another edition of Cal's Corner Radio Show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, of course. And the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Now, folks, we have what I hope is an interesting show for you tonight. As I have told a lot of people, because it's true, on Cal's Corner, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal, which means that's a wide variety of subjects. So while last week we did a two-part series on the opioid crisis with our guest Art Levine, this week we're going to talk about something very different. And let's call it Russia blinks, USA, Britain, France, and strike Syria. We're going to talk about the missile strike that was launched in a coalition led by American President Donald Trump. And what we're going to do by the end of this show is expose the ridiculous, just arguably insane claim that, of course, has gone viral on the internet thanks to left-wing liberal types like MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. The very idea, which is really delusional, that this whole thing was simply a wag the dog type operation designed to distract, quote unquote, from Trump's many problems. Not only is it ridiculous, but we'll get into the evidence that destroys that nonsense, and we'll talk about the mindset that a person would have to even believe such hooey. So let's briefly recap what happened and go over some information that some people may not know about the strike. Now, Russian military hardware, such as its overhyped S-400 anti-missile defense system, which India, by the way, is now purchasing, proved to be a joke once again, as dozens of missiles launched by the United States and its allies hit at least 8 different locations, completely destroying some of them in Syria. Now, famed Nobel Prize-winning scientist, the legendary Dr. Albert Einstein, once stated that, quote, "The world is a dangerous place to live, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it," unquote. Put another way, evil only succeeds when good fails to do its rightful moral job. Now, Einstein was right, as usual. History has repeatedly proven that what he said is true. Now, fast forward to the present, where American President Donald Trump gave a short speech from the White House announcing that, working in concert with Great Britain and France, that a joint military strike against Syria and its brutal dictator Bashar Assad had taken place. Arguably, Trump echoed both the moral sentiment of Einstein's factual observation about human behavior and its frequent barbaric history, hitting at least 8 different locations in Syria. Some of the targets successfully struck and even destroyed were chemical weapons research labs, their storage facilities, and commercial airports where planes carrying these illegal deadly weapons could be launched from. Now, this is what Trump said. "My fellow Americans, a short time ago, I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. A combined operation with the armed forces of France and the United Kingdom is now underway. We thank them both. Tonight, I want to speak with you about why we have taken this action. 1 year ago, Assad launched a savage chemical weapons attack against his own innocent people. The United States responded with 58 missile strikes that destroyed 20% of the Syrian Air Force. Last Saturday, the Assad regime again deployed chemical weapons to slaughter innocent civilians, this time in the town of Douma, near the Syrian capital of Damascus. This massacre was a significant escalation in a pattern of chemical weapons use by that very terrible regime. The evil and the despicable attack left mothers and fathers, infants and children, thrashing in pain and gasping for air. These are not the actions of a man, they are crimes of a monster instead. Following the horrors of World War I a century ago, civilized nations joined together to ban chemical warfare. Chemical weapons are uniquely dangerous not only because they inflict gruesome suffering, but because even small amounts can unleash widespread devastation. The purpose of our actions tonight is to establish a strong deterrent against the production, spread, and use of chemical weapons. Establishing this deterrent is a vital national security interest of the United States. The combined American, British, and French response to these atrocities will integrate all instruments of our national power, military, economic, and diplomatic. We are prepared to sustain this response until the Syrian regime stops its use of prohibited chemical agents. I also have a message tonight for the two governments most responsible for supporting, equipping, and financing the criminal Assad regime. To Iran and to Russia, I ask, what kind of a nation wants to be associated with the mass murder of innocent men, women, and children? The nations of the world can be judged by the friends they keep. No nation can succeed in the long run by promoting rogue states, brutal tyrants, and murderous dictators. In 2013, President Putin and his government promised the world that they would guarantee the elimination of Syria's chemical weapons. Assad's recent attack and today's response are the direct result of Russia's failure to keep that promise. Russia must decide if it will continue down this dark path or if it will join with the civilized nations as a force for stability and peace. Hopefully, someday we'll get along with Russia and maybe even Iran, but maybe not. I will say this: the United States has a lot to offer with the greatest and most powerful economy in the history of the world. In Syria, the United States, with but a small force being used to eliminate what is left of ISIS, is doing what is necessary to protect the American people. Over the last year, nearly 100% of the territory once controlled by the so-called ISIS caliphate in Syria and Iraq has been liberated and eliminated. The United States has also rebuilt our friendships across the Middle East. We have asked our partners to take greater responsibility for securing their home region, including contributing large amounts of money for the resources, equipment, and all of the anti-ISIS effort. Increased engagement from our friends, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Egypt, and others, can ensure that Iran does not profit from the eradication of ISIS. America does not seek an indefinite presence in Syria under no circumstances. As other nations step up their contributions, we look forward to the day when we can bring our warriors home, and great warriors they are. Looking around our very troubled world, Americans have no illusions. We cannot purge the world of evil or act everywhere there is tyranny. No amount of American blood or treasure can produce lasting peace and security in the Middle East. It's a troubled place. We will try to make it better, but it is a troubled place. The United States will be a partner and a friend, but the fate of the region lies in the hands of its own people. In the last century, we looked straight into the darkest places of the human soul. We saw the anguish that can be unleashed and the evil that can take hold. By the end of World War I, more than 1 million people had been killed or injured by chemical weapons. We never want to see that ghastly specter return. So today, the nations of Britain, France, and the United States of America have marshaled their righteous power against barbarism and brutality. Tonight, I ask all Americans to say a prayer for our noble warriors and our allies as they carry out their missions. We pray that God will bring comfort to those suffering in Syria. We pray that God will guide the whole region toward a future of dignity and of peace. And we pray that God will continue to watch over and bless the United States of America. Thank you, and good night. Thank you. Now, that was the speech that President Trump gave. It was straight to the point, straightforward, minus any hyperbole, which he is often known for. In listening to it, you must take it wholly seriously. But that's not what people like Rachel Maddow, it seems, and others who believe that this whole attack was simply to distract the world from Trump's troubles. It's ridiculous. It's insane. It's beyond loopy. First of all, if you look at the troubles that Trump is facing, and they're very real ones, let's not mince words or let's not downplay them. The interview with former FBI Director James Comey had yet to take place when Trump gave this speech. It was still going to air on ABC TV on Sunday night. And guess what, folks? It did. So the very idea that this was a wag the dog type distraction for what? A couple of days? Because after the storm died down and the global reaction came in, which was mostly favorable, by the way, for the U.S. standing up for what is morally right, to punish those who were using weapons of mass destruction, in this case chemical weapons, most of the support around the globe, even at the UN, was in the favor of what Trump did. But you can't tell that to left-wing liberals and Trump haters because they're extremists. They're blinded by the very same hatred, except in the other direction, that they criticize Trump hardcore supporters for. We'll be back after this commercial break.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com.
Welcome back to segment 2 here on Cal's Corner Radio Show on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff. I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. So we recapped the speech that President Trump gave, very short speech actually, just a few minutes long, announcing the military action that he undertook with Great Britain and France. The global reaction to that in the aftermath was mostly positive. However, on the far left, and including, ironically, on the furthest spectrum of the far right, the reaction was negative. Now, before we come back to that issue and expose how this is not possible to have been a wag the dog operation, it wasn't a design distraction, contrary to what people say, or some people say, as thankfully a distinct minority. Let's review some background material on Syria and explode some myths that the left-wing liberal media is wholly and directly responsible for spreading. Now, the current crisis in Syria, one can argue, where it concerns at least American involvement in it, can be traced back to the previous administration of Barack Obama and specifically his then Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. Now, a modern left-wing liberal myth is that the civil war in Syria, that has displaced as much as half of its population and has murdered hundreds of thousands of its people, was essentially organic in origin and began in earnest when Assad massacred innocent protesters who were demonstrating against his regime. Now, this has never been true. What was euphemistically called the Arab Spring by the agenda-driven liberal media has always been a myth, more hyperbole than substance. In reality, to genuinely understand the present mess in Syria and how things devolved to the insane quagmire that exists today, one needs to admit the inconvenient truth that it was indeed Trump's predecessor, former President Barack Obama, and his then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who got the bright idea to start interfering in Syria to try to oust Assad. Now, using the tired and true tactic of what is called a presidential finding, Obama issued secret orders to the CIA and Clinton's State Department to begin a series of covert operations to further destabilize Syria and depose Assad. Obama and Clinton's key partners in this illegal, under international laws, act were the Saudis, Qataris, Kuwait, and Turkey. The key command center for this operation was located in Turkey. Their motive for eliminating Assad was not because they genuinely cared about the fate of the Syrian people. Their larger concern was to weaken Iran in the run-up to the nuclear deal negotiations that were scheduled to take place. Assad is kept in power by Iran and now Russia. Russia was not as involved in propping up Syria back when Obama issued his orders, when the now disgraced General David Petraeus was the CIA's director. Now, if there was ever a case for hypocrisy, at least where it concerns Barack Obama, this is it. Because Obama's decision to try to force regime change anywhere in the world was pure hypocrisy. You have to remember that he famously ran for president, attacking Republican President George W. Bush for invading Iraq and ousting its genocidal dictator Saddam Hussein using military force. Yet here was Obama now trying the same thing in Syria. Instead of using the U.S. military, he was arming what he euphemistically called moderate rebels with weapons, even members of the terrorist group Al-Qaeda, as long as they promised not to attack the USA. During Obama's opposition to regime change as president, he successfully ousted America's most reliable ally in the Middle East. This was Egypt's dictator Hosni Mubarak, helping put the Islamo-fascist Muslim Brotherhood into power in Egypt, which proved to be a disaster. He and Clinton also ousted Libya's dictator Muammar Gaddafi, and Libya is still a disaster today. Obama hypocritically had no post-war planning, even told the media that he regretted this fact, yet attacked Bush for the same thing concerning Iraq. Bush also had no post-war planning. So as Obama's efforts to overthrow Assad imploded, especially when the terrorist group the Islamic State seized large portions of Syrian territory, Assad's regime was strengthened by the entrance of Iran's battle-hardened troops from the terrorist group Hezbollah, who were making huge gains on the ground. Then Russia stepped in, all but ensuring that Obama would end up the loser. Russian President Vladimir Putin quickly understood that Obama was always out of his league where it concerned dealing with Russia, ever since Obama naively and stupidly declared, along with Clinton, that there had been a reset with the Russians when he gave his infamous and embarrassing peace in our time type Neville Chamberlain speech at Prague Castle in the Czech Republic shortly after he became president. Now, I'll tell you, I was personally present for this event. I lived in the Czech Republic for 10 years. I was at Prague Castle, I saw Barack Obama, and I personally witnessed him embarrass himself because the Czechs, who understand the brutalities of Russian occupation and were forced to endure it for decades because the Western world gave them over to Joseph Stalin, didn't appreciate what Obama said for the only reason that matters. It was not only a lie, it was a damn lie. Now let's talk about disarming Syria's weapons of mass destruction. This was another debacle of the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton's replacement, former Secretary of State John Kerry. Now, Obama further made a fool of himself when he boldly declared that if Syria ever used chemical weapons, that this was a, quote, red line, unquote, that he had drawn in the sand and would take military action to stop it. What Obama did not say is that he drew his red line in disappearing ink. Put another way, his promise was worthless, just as it had been on passing comprehensive immigration reform during his first year in office and on other issues. So after Syria used chemical weapons when his new Secretary of State, John Kerry, was in power, it was Putin once again who played Obama and threw both him and Kerry a political lifeline. After failing to act on his promise to punish Syria, Putin cynically suggested to Obama that Assad could be disarmed and would turn over his chemical weapons to UN inspectors. Well, as I reported at that time, because it was true, Assad never truly disarmed because there was no complete transparency, and the technical know-how and facilities to easily resume making chemical weapons were never destroyed, nor were they kept under international monitoring. Put another way, Syria disarmed only if one believes that lies are facts. Now, Syria would go on to conduct still more chemical weapons attacks. Its last major one was roughly 1 year ago, which prompted President Trump to launch 49 cruise missiles in retaliation, 48 of which hit their targets. Now let's talk about Israel. A dry run for the airstrikes over Syria that were conducted again by France, Great Britain, and the United States was conducted by the Israeli Air Force when 6 days earlier to the missile strike, F-15 fighters fired missiles from Lebanese and Syrian airspace that hit Syria's T4 military base. Israel's strike was strategic and a precision one. At least 14 people were killed, the majority of whom were Iranians and members of the terrorist group Hezbollah. Israel's attack was yet another masterpiece for the Jewish state. It can and has hit Syria essentially at will for decades now. In late March 2018, Israel finally admitted what everybody who thinks critically essentially already knew, that it had destroyed Syria's rogue nuclear weapons plant in 2007, which Assad had ordered built using secret help from communist North Korea. Israeli intelligence agents obtained secret imagery of not only Syria's nuclear facility, it was an exact copy of North Korea's. North Korean workers were even clearly visible in these pictures that Israel obtained. So after Israel destroyed Assad's nuclear plant, which was designed to produce the radioactive element plutonium, Israel agreed, to its credit, to keep publicity about the incident quiet, in other words, not publicly proclaim responsibility for it, if Assad didn't protest too loudly that he had just lost his secret nuclear weapons making plant. Israel warned Assad never to try this stunt again. Assad ignored this warning and paid the price for it. In 2008, after starting to build a replacement facility, Israeli elite Shayetet 13 commandos quickly stormed the coastal villa residence in the city of Tartus of Syrian General Mohammed Soleimani, who oversaw both of these projects to build a nuclear bomb, and they killed him with several shots to the head and neck. It was like something out of a James Bond movie. Syria had not dared to restart its rogue nuclear program since then. It has not even tried. And not surprisingly, Israel helped identify and provide military targeting information to the USA, which it then later shared with Britain and France. And that intelligence was used to identify and was successful in producing the missile strike to hit the targets. Now let's talk about Britain and Turkey. We will go ahead and resume our discussion about this after the commercial break.
Broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond. You're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God, And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome to the third segment of Cal's Corner Radio Show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, we're almost done here reviewing the details of the attack, the recent military strike against Syria, launched by Britain, France, and the United States, working in concert together, as well as Israel, which also played a role. But let's talk about Britain and Turkey real quickly. There is no question that the British government had extra incentive, if you will, to join the USA in carrying out its military strikes in Syria. In fact, British fighters were launched from the nearby island of Cyprus. Britain's Prime Minister, Theresa May, still fuming, along with the rest of her country, over Russia's recent attempts to murder former double-agent spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia with a chemical nerve agent. They warned Russia, while Putin and his sock puppet politicians taunted Britain, essentially daring them to strike back. Britain now has. Putin is doing nothing of substance in retaliation, other than requesting that the UN Security Council now hold an emergency meeting. Whatever the UN Security Council opts to do or not to do, it won't matter. The USA, Britain, and France will simply veto anything Russia plans, short of truly disarming Assad, which Putin is very likely never do generally agree to. Turkey, who is playing both sides of the war in Syria by making a point to massacre Kurdish fighters who control Syria's eastern territory, has said that the missile strikes were the appropriate response. Now, as a follow-up to this, you may remember that there was an attempt by Russia to introduce a resolution to condemn the missile strikes. Predictably, Communist China sided with Russia. Ecuador, which hates the United States, that's why they have the leaker Julian Assange of WikiLeaks holed up in their embassy just to bother the United States and keep him from being prosecuted by both Great Britain, European powers, as well as America. And of course, Russia. Only those three countries sided, backed this initiative. Every other member of the council declined it and voted against them. Now let's talk about Rachel Maddow. Now, she is the famous host, of course, from MSNBC. She has her own show, The Rachel Maddow Show. Well, she is a Trump hater. Let's be honest about it. You can even watch on YouTube famous videos of her kind of melting down when Trump won the election. Now, I will tell you, as a journalist who covers American politics, and it's been very interesting doing it from outside the United States all of these years, I will tell you that I was one of the few people in the media who predicted that Trump would win. Now, I will also tell you that I'm not an expert on this stuff, and I've never claimed to be. What I have done, though, is I've written hundreds of articles on American politics, on Barack Obama, on Hillary Clinton, many different subjects, and of course, being the only foreigner, the only Gora, if you will, that's the term in Indian culture for a white person, who was at Daily World Newspaper and Daily Post. I was assigned to cover these subjects, which I love doing. And of course, when the 2016 presidential election was held, I, of course, was put in charge of covering that election. And I've had many articles published that chronicled almost on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis, what was going on. And what I noticed early on is that Trump was beating handily all of the other nearly 24 candidates from the Republican Party who ran against him. In fact, if you look at the way he handled himself in the primaries, whether you disagree with him or not, and I disagree with him quite often, I did not vote for Trump. I do not support him as a rule. But I did predict that he would win. And I was a lone voice in the wilderness, so to speak, because I absolutely know that the American media and much of the Western media, and even the media in India, what passes for media in India, since there is no real freedom of speech in India or freedom of the press in India, unfortunately, You're not allowed to criticize Gandhi, for example. You can actually go to prison for that, just like you can go to prison if you have beef from a cow. Go figure, 7 years in prison. That's their culture. So what happened is I predicted Trump would win, and I got teased and razzed over it. I also had, in the previous version of my show, I had Art Levine on there. He was on for almost 3 hours. It was the longest broadcast I had done, warning people over the dangers of a Trump presidency. And a lot of the predictions that I have made have come true. This chaos, this polarization. And again, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I cannot help but think and do firmly believe that if I can predict this, and I'm not an expert, the so-called talking heads that are always on TV and, they change seats all the time, they're on for one show, then you never hear from them again, or the regulars that appear, why didn't they figure this out? Why was it such a shock that Hillary Clinton lost? It shouldn't have been to anybody who was listening to the mood of the American people. Now, let me tell you what gave me insight into this, because it has to do with the paranormal. That's the whole reason I'm mentioning this. One of the reasons I've always been interested in the subject of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or what some people call flying saucers, is because, in my opinion, the issue is really binary. There's really only two possible explanations for this phenomenon. The first one, possible one, is that people really are seeing something. They're seeing something maybe from another planet. And if that's the case, we need to know that as a species. Why wouldn't we want to know that? Why wouldn't that be important? It's kind of obvious, isn't it? But the second reason is also just as important. Let's say that there is nothing to the UFO subject, absolutely nothing. Let's say that the sighting I had in front of two other witnesses, although I can't say it was an object from another planet because the nature of my sighting was not that detailed, but let's say that even what I saw was just some phenomenon I couldn't identify. Wasn't little gray men from Zeta Reticuli or the Pleiades or wherever. It wasn't anything extraterrestrial. Let's say that every single report is not real. It's anything but aliens. Let's say that the famous Kenneth Arnold sighting was meteors. Whatever. Anything but aliens. And we don't know. We'll never know. Well, if all these people over all these decades, if these incidents involving radar trackings, military reports, reports by pilots, so-called credible witnesses, if all of this means that nothing's going on, then maybe we're delusional as a species. And if we are delusional as a species, we need to know that too, because we've got nuclear weapons and other fun stuff to play with, other stuff we use on other people to kill them and destroy them. So the more we know about ourselves, the more we're supposed to be empowered to make the right decisions. So what has always bothered me about ufology and the paranormal is that I saw very early on as a young man in high school, that's when it first hit me, was that the whole field was polarized. And it happened with the Billy Meyer case. When I had the nerve, quote unquote, to expose the Meyer case as a hoax and a fraud and a cult, and I did that in high school, and I had the lead article in Saga's UFO Report magazine when I was in high school, exposing Meyer, and it was later expanded to a book, and then it later was expanded even further years later to the book Spacious of the Pleiades, the Billy Meyer story. I was kind of the poster child of ufology, the young kid who was in high school and was getting published and doing all this stuff. Everyone in the field loved me, including Wendell Stevens, who was the person who made the Meyer case famous in the world. But the moment I started exposing Meyer, people began to say I was a debunker. I had my mind closed. I was a skeptic. I was accused of being a CIA disinformation agent. Now, if this sounds familiar to you, this was decades ago. And as I realized, boy, this thing is so polarized, people have lost the simple capability of taking each case on its own merits or lack of, and saying, yeah, this is true, no, this is not, this is true, maybe this is true, we don't know, whatever it is. And then this hit me again when I wrote what ended up being the best-selling expose book on the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, exposing the claims in 22 of the other popular titles, arguing that it wasn't aliens who crashed and were recovered in 1947, but it was instead a top-secret military project. I met the scientist who ran that project. I interviewed him. I quote him in the book. Case closed. But nope, I got accused of being, again, a CIA disinformation agent, a skeptic, a debunker, even though I was just a researcher. And how dare these people attack me over Roswell and Meyer, since they didn't do the investigations, I did. And in the case of Roswell, I was one of the 4 original investigators. I knew Stanton Friedman. I knew Bill Moore, the original 2. I worked with the 3rd one as well. He's a very good friend of mine. And yet they're telling me, people who jumped on the Roswell bandwagon years later, what the truth about Roswell is. So I had it at that point, and that's why I walked away from the UFO field for many years, because I wanted to live what's called a life. But what really bothered me was this polarization. And I warned people that this is going to creep into the mainstream of society in other subjects if we're not careful. And sure enough, that has now happened. We can thank people like Rachel Maddow for that, and people like Alec Jones. We'll be back after this commercial break here for the last segment of this show.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. Once again, my name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer is Rob McConnell. So, sorry for ending this segment 1 minute early. That's my fault. But let's go back to the point and continue. Again, one of the reasons I've always been interested in the paranormal and UFOs is because either there's something there or there's not. If there is something there, we need to know that, whatever it is. If there's nothing there, then we're arguably delusional, and we need to know that too, because we've got wonderful things like nuclear weapons. So whether people think they can levitate, talk to dead people, have past lives, the stars determine their fate, whatever the nonsense is, we need to know the truth about that stuff one way or another. And what bothered me growing up as a young man, exposed to this at first when I was age 11, and I started contacting people like Stanton Friedman, is that people were very polarized on the issue. If you exposed one case as not being true, and it was a case that people were emotional about rather than objective about or logical about, they would take it out on you and they'd start calling you names and things like that. And I experienced that firsthand with my Billy Meyer expose book and later my Roswell book, which, to even my surprise, again became the best-selling Roswell expose of all time. It's gone into several printings, and that's still true today. It's called The Roswell UFO Crash, What They Don't Want You to Know. And the publisher deliberately chose that title and kept it vague because they knew and understood this conspiracy mentality. People would look at that, since most people believe that Roswell really happened and that it involved aliens, they meaning the government. Well, no, it didn't. They really meant the people who promote this myth lie to you and have laughed all the way to the bank, some of them, and actually have become quite famous because of spreading a myth. So what I tried to warn people about was, if we're not careful, this conspiracy mentality, this stupid mentality of shoot first and ask questions later, or fire and then aim later, will overflow into mainstream society. And that has now happened. As a foreigner who lived outside the U.S., when the 2000 presidential election went down between Al Gore and George Bush, I saw for the first time a divided America. Sure, we're the United States of America, but politically we're the divided states of America, and let's be blunt about it, and let's call it that, and let's not mince words. We must never mince words. Ever since that time, American politics have not been the same. And then you have the last election, 2016. Obama did not unite the American people behind him. I was one of the few journalists who said he would never do that it was just hype and hooey. Turned out to be true. I wish he was able to do that, but he couldn't. And then you had the 2016 election, which Trump buried his opponents on the Republican side of the equation, which was amazing because the Republican Party didn't like him. They didn't even want him in the race. But as Rachel Maddow and others showed, they blew him off as a joke. They laughed at him. They mocked him. And now he's sitting in the White House. So what I heard Rachel Maddow say the other day was that she ended a broadcast by saying that this airstrike is bad because this could lead people to think that this was a wag the dog type operation. She didn't outright come and say that directly. No, she took the, let's call it the Harry Reid cheap shot, attacking from the side. Remember Harry Reid, thank God he's no longer in the government. He used to say, oh, I heard a rumor, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if it's true, but blah, blah, blah. That's a cheap, dirty trick that politicians use and people who are not behaving ethically. Rachel Maddow did the same thing, in my opinion, when she implied that there was even any credibility to the possibility that this could be a wag the dog operation. Well, it absolutely is not. There is no evidence it is. For the only reason that matters, it is not. But yet, I am so disappointed when I have engaged people on social media, specifically Facebook and elsewhere, where I have people who actually are known for thinking very objective, commendably so, about issues, telling me, of all people, that this was a wag the dog operation. And these people didn't even bother to reconstruct the timeline of how this whole thing unfolded. And when I ask them to produce any evidence, they can't do that because it doesn't exist, because it isn't true. But yet they've become so polarized. To use an analogy, this is how some people are so blinded by their hatred for Trump or whatever issue, or Hillary Clinton, whatever it is. Let's say that Jesus Christ existed and he were alive today, and live on C-SPAN, CNN, Fox, and all the networks, including the Rachel Maddow show, Jesus Christ walked on water in front of everybody like he supposedly did in the Bible 2,000 years ago. Well, people have become so cynical today that if they saw Jesus Christ alive today, walking on the water like no human being can do, they would say it's only because he doesn't know how to swim. That is how ridiculous and stupid people have become. When extreme conspiracy shows become mainstream, it reminds me of what Stanton Friedman warned me of years ago when I was in high school. Friedman paraphrased for me what the great German physicist Max Planck said, which was essentially this. He said that new ideas come into being not because people accept them, but because their opponents die, and that a new generation is born that is accustomed to them. And that is absolutely true. Max Planck was right. Friedman was right to give me that little tidbit of wisdom, and I appreciate it, especially growing up as a teenager, being influenced by him. And that is what has happened today. People today claim they know there's a conspiracy about this. They know there's a conspiracy about that. If the government does anything, it's just not true. You have to look for ulterior motives. And yes, to a large degree, this is the fault of the U.S. government and our so-called representatives, whom I call misrepresentatives, in Washington, D.C. It is clear that record numbers of Americans no longer trust the two-party system of the Democrats and Republicans. They shouldn't. Why should they? The country is now $21 trillion in debt from both the Democrats and the Republicans. Trump's tax cut has increased this debt even further. No nation, I don't care which country it is, but especially the world's only superpower, can continue to survive and prosper on this dynamic. And if you look carefully at America, it's not prospering as well as people think. Record numbers of people hit the poverty level, around half the population, under Barack Obama. And I know he inherited an economic mess, but he didn't leave economic paradise either. The gap, when he left office, the gap between the rich and the poor is only getting bigger, to the point where it is not sustainable anymore. When you have the top 1% of the nation's rich elite controlling over half the wealth in this world, not just in the United States, but in the entire world, something is wrong, and it's going to collapse. And then you have other mentalities where globalization is mismanaged. You know, look at communist China. There was an item in the news today that the British government, to cut costs, may actually, once they leave the European Union in their so-called Brexit initiative, they may actually start paying China to make their passports now, just to save costs. Well, that's arguably insane. Why do we give China any money when they just take that money, use it to build up their military, and use it against the West? They're slowly biting the hand that feeds them, and we're dumb enough to keep feeding them. So there's a lot of problems here, and this show cannot cover all of them in one episode. But getting back to the wag the dog thing, I'll tell you in a short version what the timeline of the attack was. And I don't care if anybody says it was a wag the dog operation, it was not. And shame on Rachel Maddow for planting this seed, helping it to go viral. She knows better, and that's what makes what she did inexcusable. You must remember that 6 days before the attack, Israel launched missile strikes. They provided reconnaissance intelligence targets, which were shared with the British and the French. And then you will recall, you can easily find this on the internet, that a couple of warships were launched towards the Syrian coast. And they received a lot of press attention. The buildup was that these are going to be part of the attack armada. Well, no, what they were was decoys. They were deliberate decoys. They didn't fire any shots at all. This was to mislead the Russians. And then it took time to go ahead and get evidence in the form of blood tests conducted by Turkish doctors to identify that VX nerve agent had been used. Okay? And once that was confirmed, the plans were undertaken with France and Great Britain. They all said, we support you on this. We'll help you. We'll be part of the attack force. And you'll notice that despite the complaints that Trump didn't go through Congress, even though other presidents haven't done that either, Obama didn't seek congressional approval when he bombed Libya. Reagan didn't do it either when he bombed Libya. What happened was the Parliament of Great Britain and France, they weren't consulted either. The leaders just acted unilaterally under the authority they have legally, as did Trump, to attack. And they did the right thing. And what disgusts me the most about Rachel Maddow and others who complain about this attack is they don't seem to care about the fact that weapons of mass destruction were used. They're not crying for the victims. They don't seem to care about the important issue that innocent people were slaughtered and murdered with weapons of mass destruction. That is the most important issue. And if we don't punish countries that behave that way, then what you're really saying is it's okay to use them. And it is not okay. It must never be okay. And those that use them must always be punished. It doesn't matter who it is. We'll be back next week for another episode of Kal's Corner Radio.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.